I've been asked to introduce our keynote speaker, Joel Rose. Mr. Rose is the co-founder and chief executive officer of New Classroom Innovations Partners. And to quote from the company's vision statement, New Classrooms imagines a world where personalized learning is just the way students learn. A world where every student attends a school that meets them where they are, adapts to the unique ways they learn, and develops habits for lifelong success. It's with that vision in mind that Mr. Rose and New Classrooms created the innovative learning model Teach to One Math. Teach to One allows educators to personalize, individualize, and accelerate instruction for students. And as most of you know, the Teach to One pilot program debuted at Nathan Hale last year with resounding success. Mr. Rose began his career in education in 1992 as a fifth grade teacher in Houston. And since that time, he's served in a variety of leadership roles, including Chief Executive for Human Capital at the New York City Department of Education. It was there that he led to the creation of School to One, an initiative that mixes live, collaborative, and online instruction in order to provide students with instruction customized to their unique academic needs and learning styles. Mr. Rose earned a bachelor's degree in political science from Tufts University and a law degree from the University of Miami. He's also a graduate of the Broad Urban Superintendent's Academy and is a Pahara Aspen Education Fellow at the Aspen Institute. Mr. Rose's published articles include pieces in The Atlantic, Education Nation, and EdTech Magazine. He has spoken at numerous conferences, including Aspen's Institute Ideas Festival, NBC's Education Nation, and at the annual conferences for the American Federation of Teachers, National School Boards Association, and National Association of Independent Schools. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Joel Rose.
Thank you, Dr. Sinfran, for that wonderful introduction. It is a real privilege to be with all of you here today. Before we get started, I'd like to learn a little bit about who's in the room. Could you please stand up if you're about to go into your very first year as a teacher? Let's give them a big hand. Please stand up if this is going to be either your fifth year or beyond, teaching at least 5 years, 5 years and beyond. Please stand up. Okay, fantastic. Stay standing. Now, if you're about to go into at least your 10th year, stay standing. Otherwise, please sit down. Wow. Okay, now, 15 years. You're going into 15 years, stay standing. 20-year veterans, stay standing. Everyone else sit down. 25-year veterans, stay standing. Wow. 30 years. 35 years. Wow. I'm going to stop there. 25 years ago, I was sitting in an auditorium not unlike this one, getting ready for my first year as a teacher. And I don't remember too much about that event, I'll be honest, but I do remember going back into my classroom. And I remember the newly waxed floors. I remember flicking on the light and hearing that very light hum when you first walk into that class for the whole summer. And I remember staring at the blank bulletin boards and trying to figure out how an artistically 22-year-old guy like me was going to make them nice enough that my new 5th grade kids wouldn't make fun of me. That's what I was most concerned about. I remember about an hour or so after trying to set up my room, my principal came by and he said, "Mr. Rose, I have a few things for you." Great. And he first gave me this stack of papers, and they were the test scores from the incoming students in my class. Now at the time, Texas was using a test that translated the data into grade level equivalents. So if you were in 4th grade, 3rd month, it would say 4.3 or 5.1. And I started flipping through these papers, and I saw 3.2, 2.1, 4.6, 7.1. There was a wide variety in those numbers that I saw. And then he said, "Mr. Rose, by the way, I have right here your textbooks. Where would you like them?" This is the 5th grade curriculum. And I said, "Well, I have a question. If I'm supposed to meet kids where they are, which is why I have this data, and I'm supposed to teach the curriculum, how exactly am I supposed to do that?" And they said, we all sort of do our best, but that's the challenge of being a teacher. That is the challenge, or one of the key challenges of being a teacher. How do you meet kids where they are and still prepare them for what the world they're going to walk into? So I did what a lot of first-year teachers do. I tried really hard. I cared a lot. I spent lots of late nights trying to develop my own lessons. I tried to figure out how to keep my class orderly but still motivate the students in my class. I tried to learn as much as I could from my colleagues who had a lot more experience and wisdom than I did. Teaching was certainly the most rewarding job I've ever had. It was also the toughest. And I think I've got the evidence to prove that I made it through the year and then some. But as I thought about why the job was such a challenge, I thought a lot about the kids in my class like Roman, who came in at a 2nd grade level, and the kids in my class like Ellen, who came in on an 8th grade level, and everything in between. And it wasn't just their academic level. There were some students who were shy, who hated to work in groups, others who loved working in groups. There were some who got a little fidgety if they sat for too long, and others who didn't have that problem at all. Some who had a hard time mustering the motivation and discipline to do homework, others I couldn't give enough to. They all liked different subjects. They had different dreams. They needed different things. And I was only human. How does any elementary teacher really give each student what they need each day when there are 25 or 30 or so kids in the class? Or if you're a middle or high school teacher and you see 80, 100, 120 students or more in the course of the year, how do you meet students where they are and deliver grade level curriculum? I thought a lot about this question. It sort of led me down my own personal journey to try to understand, well, how do we get here to begin with? Why is it that we put one teacher and 30 or so students in a class at all? And it really began with this guy, Horace Mann. Horace Mann was a legislator in the state of Massachusetts, but he grew up in Boston at a time where there was tremendous tension between Catholics and Protestants. And he made it his life's mission to create a more tolerant, civilized society. So, for inspiration, he once got on his boat with his wife to Prussia, where he saw this. One teacher and about 30 kids in a room. And he said, I've seen it. I've seen the future. That's what we need back in Massachusetts, because that's what's going to teach Protestant kids and Catholic kids to coexist with one another. And he brought it back, and this became the blueprint for how Massachusetts and ultimately the rest of the country did school. It was a model designed to solve a different problem, an incredibly important problem, but one that's different than academic achievement. Now, this was back in 1843. Let's think for a moment about how much our society has evolved since 1843. We've gone from the stagecoach to the jet airplane. We've gone from the telegraph to the smartphone. We've gone from antiquated medicine to high-tech medical equipment. But the basic structure, the basic way that we do school really hasn't changed all that much over that period of time. Why is that? Well, part of the answer is that in other sectors, they have this thing called R&D. The phones in our purses or in our pockets, the cars that we drive, the trains and planes that we take, they're all the product of lots of R&D, heavy on the D, to create and drive progress. We don't have a lot of that in K-12. We do have a little bit of R, a little bit of research, and there's one study in particular that I found incredibly important and fascinating, at least in the work that our organization does. There was a study done by this guy, Benjamin Bloom. Now, you might be familiar with Dr. Bloom from the work he did in Bloom's taxonomy, which helped to classify learning objectives into higher levels of complexity and specificity. But that's actually not the paper that we're most focused on. The one that we thought was even perhaps more important than that one was the paper he did in 1984, not about Bloom's taxonomy. What he did is he looked at all of the research from all of the different educational initiatives that had taken place over the previous however long he could find. And he ignored them to try to figure out what worked best. He looked at things like money, he looked at things like class size, he looked at things like social emotional status. And what he found, among all the things that he looked at, was there was one approach that by far had the biggest impact. And that approach was individual tutoring. It had an effect size of 2 sigma. That's like moving from the middle of class to the top of the class. Many of us, as both teachers and parents, know how impactful tutoring can be. Well, what Dr. Bloom said is this is incredibly powerful, but it's not particularly practical to think that as a system we can give every kid a tutor. One, it would be incredibly expensive, and 2, there just aren't enough people to do that. So he labeled his paper on this topic the 2 sigma problem, the search for methods of group instruction as effective as one-to-one tutoring. Now, when Dr. Bloom talked about this, it wasn't the very first time that anyone talked about this particular approach, individualized instruction or personalized learning. It actually first appeared way back in the 1880s. There was a superintendent in Pueblo, Colorado, and he decided to adopt the Pueblo Plan, which was to enable students to move at their own pace. It didn't quite work because there weren't enough curriculum materials to support it. A few decades later, in 1916, John Dewey wrote Democracy in Education, and he advocated for placing the child, not the classroom, at the center of the classroom experience. In 1928, Sidney Presley invented what he called the teaching machine. Finally! He thought it would free teachers and pupils from educational drudgery. Anyone work with a teaching machine? I don't think so. 1968, a gentleman by the name of Fred Keller came around and started to work with schools in Brazil, adopting PSI, Personal Systems of Instruction, to help Brazil students master content, broke these curriculum into short units, and if you didn't succeed, you'd go back until you demonstrated mastery. And then in 1978, Lev Vygotsky, researchers finally published his work on the zone of proximal development, described how students learn from experiences that are just slightly beyond their current competency levels, with the help from teachers or with the help from peers. That's about 100 years of personalized learning, and the truth was, it really didn't stick very much. Educators kind of shrugged. And they shrugged because they know what you know and what we all know, which is teaching is highly relational. The idea that any computer is going to do what a teacher can do is, of course, absurd. But one thing did get educators' attention toward the end of this period, and it had nothing to do with personalized learning. It was a report that came out called A Nation at Risk in 1983 by the Presidential Commission on Educational Excellence. Now, up until this point, we've been moving far along just fine with the Horace-Mann system of schooling. We were educating everyone, and by the middle of the 20th century, other countries started to realize that was a pretty good idea, and they started doing the same. They caught up. And based on the report, some of them actually started to surpass us. So the 1983 Nation at Risk was a real wake-up call. The report talked about the educational foundations of our society are being eroded by a rising tide of mediocrity that threatens our very future as a nation and as a people. And this report really ushered in a new era of structural reforms. These reforms have really been driven off of three key tenets. The first has been a focus on standards and assessment. Since 1983, states have redone their standards to make them higher and more rigorous, and instituted assessments to help us understand whether students are in fact meeting those standards. The second is we've opened up new schools and we've closed others, and in some places introduced some level of choice for parents. And the third has just been a focus on people, on recruiting and developing great teachers and educators across the system in order to improve educational outcomes. We've collectively spent billions of dollars on these things to try to improve schools since 1983. And there are some great examples, including right here in Norwalk, where districts are really making a difference in changing outcomes for kids. But unfortunately, those districts are the exception. If we look at NAEP scores, the National Association for Educational Progress, the nation's report card, these are what 17-year-old math scores look like, going back to 1978. And here's what reading scores look like. Now, I was actually one of those people who was working on the people side. As Dr. Safarian said, I was working in human resources at the New York City Department of Education. And we were trying to do all that we could to make sure every classroom was staffed with an excellent educator. And we had done a lot of what lots of other districts are doing, and we wanted to get some different kind of inspiration. So we took our whole teams to go visit the Human Resources Department at IBM and at GE to see how do they think about this problem. Because we always talked about the 4 R's. Recruit, retain, remediate, which is develop. There's not a good R word for develop, so we use remediate. Don't love the word. And in some rare cases, remove. And we thought those 4 tenets were the key to driving the people strategy within a district. And what we learned from those visits that we had never talked about, there's actually a 5th R. And the 5th R that they used was role. Are you designing jobs that are doable? They would say that you want to make sure that people are motivated and inspired and they can feel successful and they can be successful in what it is you need them to do. And I thought right away about my own experience as a teacher and how challenging that was. And then also thought a little bit about what was missing in these 3 pillars of reform. Focusing on standards and accountabilities, focusing on choice, focusing on people. What no one was really focused on is the structure of the classroom itself. That same Horace-Mann model that we keep doing and keep doing and keep doing. Is there another way? So our team started talking about this, and we were trying to figure out what could possibly be another way. And coincidentally, around this time, I went to go visit a friend of mine who runs an adult learning center. And I was meeting him for lunch, and I'm waiting in the lobby for him to come down, and I look at this sign in the lobby. And the sign said this: choose your modality. You could learn live, you could learn online, or you could do sort of a blend. They called it mentor learning at the time. And I just thought, wow, that's incredible. Maybe one of the reasons that the job of a teacher is so challenging is because we're only one modality. We can only teach one thing at a time. Students are coming in with a wide variety of needs. But if somehow we could integrate other approaches, other ways of learning, all into one classroom environment, we could then contemporaneously teach multiple things. That would enable us to both personalize the experience for kids and make the job of the teacher far more sustainable. Is that even possible? So we started brainstorming, what could that possibly look like? And we started sketching out this idea for a classroom. We thought about maybe having lots of different stations in one classroom, and some stations would be for teachers, for teacher-led instruction, and some stations would be for collaborative learning, some stations would be for online learning. We thought not just for one classroom, we combine 4 or 5 or 6 classrooms into one open space. Academically, we wanted to make sure that kids could learn the same types of skills and concepts, but through multiple ways. We knew that as students learn different skills and concepts in different ways, it deepens their conceptual understanding, particularly in math. We talked about technology, and we thought, well, technology is one way of delivering instruction. It's not the best way, but it's certainly not. It certainly can be helpful. But what we can really use technology for is to help us organize the whole thing, to figure out what each student should do each day, to schedule. We said, aha, the key to sort of making this kind of model work is the scheduling. Can you schedule the right lesson for the right student each day? And then operationally, we thought we wanted to make sure that we were designing a classroom where the burden of the whole experience wasn't on the backs of teachers. Too many times we saw, and I experienced this as well, Mr. Rose, here's all the data, good luck. Mr. Rose, here's the computer, good luck. But how do we figure out the logistics to make the job of the teacher more sustainable? We decided to focus just in one subject. We focused on middle grade math, in part because so many of the learning gaps that kids carry from prior grades really have an impact. If you didn't quite master multiplication in elementary school, you have a really hard time learning middle school math. Nationally, only about 1/3 of kids leave 8th grade ready for high school, and they have less than a 20% chance of catching up. So we just wanted to focus on middle grade math to see if this was even possible. We got to work, drawing out the classrooms, talking to teachers, talking to educators. This is my partner trying to figure out the behind-the-scenes technology in order to make this work. Now, the first week was a disaster. Kids didn't know where to go, teachers didn't know where to go, the computers didn't work. Now, luckily, this was in the summer. We decided to do this as a summer school program from 8:30 in the morning to 12:30 in the afternoon. The kids then left, and we spent sometimes the next 11 hours trying to figure out what they should do tomorrow based on how they did today. We thought we had it, we didn't, but eventually, we figured out a way to make it work. We called it School of One, and this is sort of what it looked like once we got rolling. This was back in 2009. Time magazine ended up naming School of one of the best inventions of the year. It was the first ever education invention to make Time's best inventions list. And that was exciting for us. Ultimately, School of One became an after-school program, and then it replaced the core curriculum in 3 New York City middle schools before we ultimately turned it into its own independent nonprofit organization to make this kind of model available to kids outside of New York. Now, one of the key takeaways we had from the School of One experience is that it's not about the technology. It's really about what we call the model. A model that has both an academic component as well as an operational component, and in our case, in one that's fueled by lots of technology and data. And the model itself needs to be designed. And when we started to design the model, we wanted to have some anchors that we could really focus on. We didn't just want to build something for the sake of building something. We wanted to make sure we were solving for a different kind of classroom experience that worked far better for kids and far better for teachers. So we had 10 design tenets. You can see them up here. I want to talk about a couple. One of the design tenets was complete learners. As we design these experiences for kids, it's not just about academic outcomes. It's also about a host of social and emotional indicators, from collaboration to perseverance, that we can embed into the fabric of the model and begin to help kids develop those skills and competencies. Another one is personalized pathways. We're often associated with personalized learning. We do personalized learning well. But while it seems like semantics, we like to say new models that enable personalized learning, because personalized learning is just one core tenet of the model that we've created. And then finally, shared ownership is between students and teachers. That having a learning community where everyone is in this together, where teachers are working collaboratively both with each other and with students to help them to accelerate. So what does this all look like when it's in practice? Well, we've been fortunate enough over the last year to work with Dr. Sacchi and his phenomenal team at Nathan Hale Middle School. We'll show you, I think we have a video queued up. We'll give you a sense for what it all looks like when it comes to life.
I'm a former teacher. I taught 5th grade, and I was given a set of 5th grade math textbooks and told good luck. And I think that's the story of thousands of teachers across the country and around the world each day. We have this idea in our mind of putting one teacher, 30 or so kids in an 800 square foot room with a textbook, and then we start the conversation about how do we make our schools better. And I think for us, the question was, do we have to necessarily start with those assumptions?
Originally, Joel and I just went to lunch, and he had this idea that he wanted to be able to personalize learning in some way, shape, or form, and I just come off some large technology projects in the New York City Department of Ed, and we just started brainstorming.
Teach to One is an entirely different learning model. A learning model that has both an academic component, so things like learning progressions and skill maps, and content and assessment, but also an operational component. How does homework work? Student traffic flow, where do kids put their backpacks? Where does a substitute teacher one day? We've integrated all of these things into a program that can then be configured to the needs of each type of school.
Having a program that exists that allows a child to feel that success and that allows a child to be pushed has just been remarkable for us as a school.
I enjoy teaching kids, watching them learn new things, aha moment, like when they finally get it. That's my passion. Teach to One is different from traditional classroom because you're not using a textbook and doing one lesson. We have different modalities, so the kids have the opportunity to learn a skill in different ways. They could have a live lesson with a teacher, they could be learning with a peer, or they could be learning with a small group.
Sometimes you learn from the teacher and you need to just sort of go off and think about that and then come back. Or sometimes you need to have another student explain it to you in another way. So we think the teacher plays a tremendously critical role in what's going on, but there are certain pieces that maybe a student can do on a computer that can do with other students, which allows those teachers to focus more specifically on individual students.
I can tell you as a teacher, I could never create, well, I guess I can't say never, but it'd be very challenging for anyone to flawlessly create a lesson for one block of maybe a 3rd grade, an 8th grade, a 7th grade, all in one room, and then be able to take the exit slip and figure out who needs more, who needs different, who needs what, and create a whole new day for the next day.
We have to balance 3 things, both what the needs are for the individual student, what the group needs are for the entire class or cohort of students, and what the teacher's realities are as well. So you have to figure out, how do you balance these 3 things? We call it our standing trinity.
At times we think that we know, oh, it's only an algorithm, like the program might not pick up on this, and then it does.
So we're about 116, 117% above average in year 1 of implementation. Our ELL students and our special needs students have scored well above the national average as well. So it's been a fantastic first year.
but they do a lot of the behind-the-scenes thinking that we don't really have to focus on, so we can focus on teaching and learning. And it's been an incredible partnership.
I like the collaboration. I like the variety of each day. Days fly by now as a teacher. I like the different modalities, and it just makes it exciting.
So what we're seeing are teachers embracing the shift, finding that it creates a much more fulfilling professional experience for them. We're seeing students embrace this shift. It's far more engaging than flipping through the pages of the textbook over the course of the year. And we're seeing administrators embrace this shift. They're wanting to be responsive to what their communities are asking for, which is to make sure the schools are able to meet the unique needs of each and every student.
Kids who get a green in my class, I started just a little fist bump thing. And so when the kids get their green or green sparkly, I had a green fist bump. And they're coming up and they're excited about it.
There is a genius inside every student, and we have to figure out how to unlock it and get it out there. And the traditional model, while it reaches plenty of students, it doesn't reach everyone. So we owe it to them to go on this journey, to find a way to get there.
We filmed all that video halfway through the year. Actually, Nathan Hale ended the year 130%, I think it was, above the national average. So I just want to congratulate the teachers who are here, the administrators. We have not figured this whole thing out by a long shot. Every day, the teachers and students at Nathan Hale and the other partner schools we work with around the country help us to understand how we make this model more impactful, how we make the role of the educator more sustainable, and how we make the experience more joyful and inspiring for everyone. So where is this all going? And what are we learning? And how can that help to inform what's happening in your schools, in your classrooms, and in your great community? Well, let's talk about a little bit about what's happened just in the last 10 years when it comes to personalization. So I'll walk you through 100 years before that. In the last 10 years, things are actually starting to pick up a little bit. There have been a few key milestones that's, I think, worth calling out. Some of you may use Khan Academy in your classrooms, online free videos for every subject and every grade. That came out 10 years ago in 2007. The work we did with School of One was in 2009. The U.S. Department of Education released grants called Investing in Innovation grants, really trying to support new models and new approaches in 2010. A great book by Michael Horn and Heather Stacker called Blended, the different ways that teachers integrate new approaches in their classrooms, came out in 2014. And then just earlier this year, Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan announced that they're going to be giving away the majority of their fortunes to personalized learning and to schools and districts that are really looking to embrace this new way. So I think more has really happened in the last 10 years than in the 100 years before that, but also we're sort of all just getting started. We're very much in the early innings of what's possible when we think about personalization. We've learned a few things along the way, and I want to share a couple of them. One is, what does personalized learning actually mean? What is the definition? Well, there actually is no official definition. There are a number out there that you can certainly look up on your own, from the Department of Education to a number of funders put definition up there. Leap Innovations in Chicago, CAPS has a definition, INCOL. The one that I happen to think is most interesting was in Broward County, Florida. I'll read this if we all can't see it. It says, personalized learning, an educational model that seeks to accelerate student learning by tailoring the instructional environment, what, when, how, and where students learn to address the individual needs, skills, and interests of each student. Students take ownership over their own learning while also developing deep personal connections with each other, their teachers, and other adults. Some definitions of personalized learning focus on tailoring, some focus on the student voice and student choice. What I like about this one, it really does combine both of them. Now, there are others who think you're wasting your time trying to define personalized learning. The whole article that came out about that. So what I just find it useful for is, as you begin to talk about personalized learning in your school communities, it's good to level set among each other on what you're talking about, so you can really understand what it is that you want to solve for. So that's one piece, is the importance of having a common language around this type of work. The second thing that we've learned is how critical it is to have a shared vision for instruction at the district level and at the school level. This is not about, let's buy a bunch of iPads and put them in the classroom. This is about communities collectively having a vision for how they want learning to happen. That starts at the district level, and there have been a few districts, including this great district, that have really been at the leading edge of driving personalized learning. Spring Branch has talked about a strategic plan called the Learner's Journey that commits to ensuring an excellent education for every child by striving to meet each child where they are by way of personalizing instruction. Chicago, through personalized learning, will move away from a one-size-fits-all system to one where every student is empowered to become a curious, self-directed, and lifelong learner, attributes that are critical to success. And here in Norwalk, the strategic plan ensures all students are on track to graduate through a learning program that personalizes instruction, creates greater flexibility in scheduling, a key part of personalized learning, and provides opportunities for the recuperative learning necessary to improve the 4- and 5-year graduation rates. And that's not Connecticut, is it? We do math. But the good thing is, real-time formative assessment gives kids feedback so they can learn from their mistakes and correct it for the next time. So the leadership is important. Now, I will tell you there are some places, though, where they put the statement on their website and it kind of ends there. And that's not what we need right now. The leadership at the district level needs to cascade through to buildings, to school leaders and to their teachers, and develop this shared vision for what instruction needs to look like. I've seen schools where the teachers have gone on a year-long journey where they read different books, they visit different classrooms, they together figure out what they want their school to look like in 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years, and begin to work toward that vision. And as they do that, they come to this recognition that it's not just about the technology or even about the academics. This component of operational design, of really understanding how things will be implemented on the ground, working through those details, is in many ways just as important as the high-level vision. The third thing we learned a lot about is the teacher role. And I can tell you, we're roughly in 40 schools around the country. The schools with the most successful implementations are the ones with the highest levels of teacher collaboration. We're pretty good at the tech. All the action is as we imagine it to be, it's with the teachers. With our particular model, it requires teachers to, in some ways, put aside how they might want to do things as an individual teacher for how we do things as a team. One of my colleagues likes to say, you're going to go from teaching as neighbors to teaching as roommates. And that's a process. But what we find is when teachers go through that process, when they make that shift, they find the job to be far less isolating, far more rewarding, and far more fulfilling. The fourth piece, and I'll admit, when we first went into this, I didn't go in with this lens, is about student ownership. But every time I go into one of our programs, I hear this from the kids, how much they own their learning, how they have the power to accelerate beyond what they even thought was possible. And I hear from teachers, to some degree, what a relief it is to somehow shift some of the cognitive burden from them onto the kids. They can handle it. If you give them the tools and the resources, they can often do more than you might realize. And finally, another big lesson is some people think personalized learning is just for remediation, for catching kids up. We've learned that that's not true. In fact, in our first couple of years, we noticed the kids who were behind grade level did a little bit better than the kids who are on or above grade level. We realized, though, that the reason for that is because kids who already come in on or above grade level don't have as much room to grow. So this year, for about 10% of the students we served, we told our system to treat them as if they were one grade higher. We said, even though this kid's a 6th grader, instead of being an above grade 6th grader, treat this child as a below grade 7th grader. And then the results skyrocketed. So personalized learning is not just about remediation, it's also about acceleration. We all have a lot to be excited about when it comes to new learning models that enable personalization. And there are some districts that are thinking along these lines, but there aren't many. And you are lucky to be in one of them. Your board, your superintendent, leaders across the system are saying that this is what we need to do, not just in the near term, but also over the long term. That our students deserve this, our teachers deserve this, and our community deserves this. As the school year is about to start, we know we're getting ready for more than just the first day of school. We're not just setting up our rooms and finalizing our lesson plans. This is a moment where we all have the power to harness our collective creative energies, to combine the professional wisdom that you've accumulated over your careers with the kinds of tools and resources that Horace Mann could have never even imagined. Now, it can sometimes feel like new things are happening in society all the time. What will they come up next? Look what's on my phone now. Look what they put in this card. They are just creating all this stuff. And we can sometimes think that they are working on things. But I think what I've learned over the last 100 years, well, not 147 years, but the history of personalized learning over the last 100 years, is they are not working on education. They don't really understand education. And it's incumbent upon all of us to be the catalyst. We understand this challenge, we can solve this, and we can be the leaders in bringing a new type of learning environment to all of our students. We are just in the midst of an exciting journey, and you all are helping to lead the way. So please continue to be fearless in your pursuit of ensuring all students are met where they are, and they are on a path to lifelong learning and success. Thank you, and have a wonderful school.